I'm so glad that you joined us today for Biblically Grounded. I am your host, Clayton Van Huss. Now, one of the cool things about going to conferences is you meet new and interesting people. And I met Dr. Jim Johnson from the Institute for Creation Research. You were set up next to us here at the conference, and we found out that we had some common interests. Dr. Johnson, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you get to meet new people. I'm afraid you didn't get an interesting one on this one, but hey, I'll answer your questions.
Okay, well, that's a start. That's a start. I don't know, though. I find your work very interesting. So you are with ICR, and you do some writing for Acts and Facts, which is the magazine that they send out.
Yeah. Every 2 months we have a regular issue, and then sometimes we have a special issue. And if I'm included in it, usually I'm on page 20 or 21.
Okay. And
writing on apologetics.
Yeah, and how long have you been doing that?
More than 17 years.
Okay. So I'm going to have to go home and look at all my copies of Acts and Facts. And I renewed my subscription while I was here because I had let it lapse while I was off at seminary. But I'm going to go home and I'm going to look and read all of your articles.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, I plan to. We'll see how that turns out, right? So an interesting thing, the thing that kind of got us talking, is you have an interest in a certain archaeological artifact.
I do.
Something that is well known to our viewers. We've talked about it a little bit before in the program, but you've got a kind of a new view. We're talking about the Mesha stele, or the Moabite Stone. And this is an artifact that actually shows us some very cool things about the Bible, and I think we're going to talk about some of the various things that it shows. It's been in the news recently for some of the inscription on it that they've been able to read with new photography. So it's kind of a thing that's fresh, but you have a fresh look. First of all, let's talk about what the Mesha stele, or the Moabite Stone, which title do you prefer?
It's fine with me either way.
Okay, well, your book says the Moabite Stone. And by the way, this is a phone book here.
I think it's close to 500 pages.
I'm pretty excited about it. I'm taking a copy home to read, and I was impressed. It's a collection of articles that you've written, correct? Is that? It's
like a main introduction overview that walks you through line by line what the Moabite Stone says, and then the commentary that goes with it would be details of the linguistics and details of the geography. And then there are appendices that follow it, which include a commentary on the book of Ruth, since she was a Moabitess, and then also interlinear, so that you can see the actual text line by line of the Moabite Stone with Hebrew equivalent below it and English equivalent below it.
That is really exciting. That's something I plan to go home and really take a look at. Now, I'm not going to pretend. I took Hebrew, like any good seminarian and any good student of biblical archaeology. I took biblical Hebrew, but I'm going to say when it comes to languages, that's not my strongest point. But I'm still going to go home and go through where you've done that interlinear line by line from the stone. Now, so this stone is what we call a stele. That's a Greek word. It's a monument, and it is a when a king or an emperor, somebody is with military prowess, goes and they do some great thing, they put up these stones to themselves, these monuments where they talk about their military campaigns. Another famous one that we've talked about a lot is the Merneptah stele, or the Tel Dan stele, where these kings put up these inscriptions about their victories. And so the Moabite Stone, or the Mesha stele, is one of those from Moab. Erected by the king Mesha, which we'll talk about him shortly. So can you tell us a little bit about the stone, about the Moabite Stone, and its importance to us as Bible believers?
Well, it's about a yard high. It looks like a gravestone. When I was a boy, I grew up next to a cemetery, so that's what it immediately reminds me of. And like a lot of gravestones, which will identify a person and say something about the importance of that person's life, the Moabite stone is King Mesha. That's how I pronounce it, but I'm probably wrong. It doesn't matter. He's bragging. He's basically bragging about the great things that he accomplished. And if he had some things that weren't so great, he's going to leave those out. But the things that he's really proud of, he has somebody to engrave that onto this stone. And now the reconstructed pieces of that stone are in, I'm told, the first floor of the Louvre Museum in Paris, France. But the relevance to me, especially because of biblical apologetics is my main field, is that it corroborates what the Bible says on several things. And by corroborate, I compare that to a courtroom. A lot of my background is law. So in addition to Hebrew and some other areas that I've studied, went to law school, practiced in courtrooms, federal and state, and then in 1996 was appointed to a panel for part-time judges. And so one of the things that I learned from that is the importance of recognizing reliable evidence, particularly reliable testimony, in contrast to unreliable fake evidence where someone's trying to sell a falsehood. And what happens when you're confronted with one voice who's saying X and another voice who's saying the opposite of X, and you've got to figure out who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. And and that's a very different role, that is, if you're the decision maker as a judge, than if you are, say, the lawyer who's advocating for one side or another. Right. So when I think about the scriptures, and I think about the truth that God gives us in the scriptures, that is the perfect witness that we will ever have of past events or of the present, or for that matter, telling us what's going to happen in the future. And in a lot of courtroom settings, you'll have one main witness. Now, and that the comparison breaks down because the Bible's perfect, and the witness in a courtroom setting is not going to be all-knowing and have a perfect memory or perfect ability to communicate, that kind of thing. God has perfect memory, obviously, and knows everything, and so he's obviously the perfect witness in all things. But to further compare it to a courtroom's experience, in a courtroom, you'll often have in a trial the main witness who kind of covers everything. And then you'll have what you could call helper witnesses, mm-hmm. who will come in and they will back up the main witness on this one point or this other point. So if there are maybe three main things that happened in a controversy, the main witness will cover all three, and then you'll have a corroborating witness who will come in and back up the main witness on point number one, and then a different corroborating witness come in and back up the main witness on point number two. And the Moabite stone, without intending to be so, mm-hmm. corroborates the Bible. It's like a corroborating witness, except for it's a hostile witness, because right. the voice behind the stone is someone who doesn't like the God of the Bible. In fact, he hates the Jews and he hates the God of the Bible. He even names him by name. Mm-hmm. I mean, the four letters that we call Yahweh, they appear in the Moabite stone. So he knows who the Jews' God is, and he knows that he identifies with a false god that he calls Chemosh.
Yep, and he mentions him too. He's making this a cosmic thing going on here.
Yeah. He's basically saying, I belong to Chemosh. I go to battle. I battle against the Israelites. They belong to Yahweh, and we're the winners. And so this is all about honoring Chemosh, except for you get this funny feeling, is this really all about honoring Chemosh, or is this really more about honoring Mesha? Is this really just him bragging, but to make it look pious, he gives some credit to his idol? And he sure does use the word I myself a lot.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. I want to talk about that. Now this is really interesting, and this is a new aspect that I'd not noticed. So you said he uses I myself.
Yeah.
And where did you extracted that from the Moabite language?
Right. Well, being a language very similar to Hebrew and very similar to Aramaic, the verbs have built into them the pronoun that goes with them. So unlike our English language, where I'd say I jump, you jump, they jump, she jumps, he jumps, the verb jump, we don't know who's doing that until we add a pronoun to it. Whereas in a Semitic language like Hebrew or Aramaic or Syriac or Moabite, the pronoun is built into the verb. So if you want to emphasize who is doing the action, you can add a pronoun to it. So instead of it saying I built this, you could add anak to it, and the meaning would be I myself built this.
Okay.
And the Moabite stone actually starts out, the very first word, I better check to make sure I'm getting this right. Always check the original source. Yeah, okay, so the original word is Anak. Anak, Mesha, Ben, Chemoshot, Melech, Moav, Ha-Divani. I myself am Mesha, the son of Chemoshot, the king of Moab, the Dibonite. And in fact, Dibon is what the King James calls it. I think now they call it Divon, but it's the same place.
Yes.
That's where they found the Moabite stone when they found it. And I got a map here in my book here. But as you can see, Divon here is a little bit north of the Arnon River. So the Arnon River starts in the east, and it flows west, and it dumps into the Dead Sea. So the Arnon River is important as a geographic boundary because what's below it, that is south of it, is Moab. What's above it is the territory of Reuben. And then when you get up beyond, further north from that, it's the territory of Gad. That becomes important a little bit later as we'll talk about. But the stone itself was found in Dibon, and thankfully we have it was kind of an unusual the way that we got its text preserved, but at least we do.
Right. Yeah, there was and I want to know like how so you have a background in law as a lawyer, as a judge.
Part-time judge.
Part-time judge. Okay, all right. So you've seen the law from, and you know how to look at evidence and how to pull things together. Why did you want to study the Moabite stone? What put you into that?
Actually, I guess it was the other way around. When I was a teenager, I wanted clarification on some topics that were mentioned in the book of Jude. And my youth pastor, who's here at the conference today, gave me a little Bible commentary, Maxwell Coder's Jude, the Acts of the Apostates, Moody Press, little paperback. And as he was explaining the different details of the book of Jude, at one point he referred to the Greek that was translated into English, and that gave a little extra clarity on some details. And then at one point, it was a verse that talked about Enoch, and in order to appreciate what was going on in the life of Enoch, he mentioned Methuselah, and he did a little study in Hebrew, and I went, you know what? I think I want to learn Greek, and I want to learn Hebrew. So as a teenager, that became a life goal. And then in college, I was able to study Hebrew and Aramaic and use that as my foreign language to graduate. My second Hebrew teacher said, well, while we're at it, why don't we go ahead and learn Moabite and maybe Syriac, and if we have enough time, Samaritan. And we didn't have time for Samaritan. But it was kind of hard to say no, because at that point I was the only student in the class.
Oh.
So I knew who he was going to call on, and so I was tutored a lot of the Hebrew and Aramaic and the Moabite, and I became fascinated with the Moabite stone in college, and so I did research on it then, and I thought, when I finally get finished my education to where I'm doing what's required of me, and when I can just study what I want to on my own, I'm going to go back to the Moabite stone, and I'm going to do a serious study on it. Because it's about 36 lines, and so it's doable. It's something I could do on the side if I work on that. But I thought there's a lot in here that I think is really interesting that Bible-believing Christians could appreciate. So, skip forward in time, go to law school, and skip forward in time again. And I have the opportunity to complete my studies on that. But so there's about half a dozen different little details in the Moabite Stone that I think are worth sharing, and hopefully we can get to some of that in the time we have today.
Sure, let's do that. Let's jump into the Moabite Stone here. And I guess first maybe we should look at the context, should we not?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the Moabite Stone, let's look at 2 Kings 3:4, because King Mesha is mentioned one time only in the Bible, and this is the man whose text we are reading when we look at the Moabite Stone.
Okay, so in 2 Kings chapter 3 verse 4, "And Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs, and 100,000 rams with the wool. But it came to pass, when Ahab was dead, that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel."
So Moab was having to pay taxes or tribute to the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. And the way that they paid taxes instead of in dollars was in sheep, the animals or the wool or both. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because Mesha brags about, in line 30 of his monument, what you could call his bragging stone, he brags about
bragging stone.
Yeah,
I like that.
Let me see. He says, whenever they start a new sentence in Moabite, they have a straight line between the last sentence and the second sentence, and then we see a little dot. That's how they separate the words.
Of the words, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he says in line 31, "And I established there sheep raising," and then he talks about the sheep of the land, and then some of the pieces are missing there, so we don't know the full sentences there. But anyway, he did mention that sheep were part of his accomplishments. What he didn't mention in the Moabite Stone was that's because he had to pay all these sheep to the northern kingdom of Israel. But he did rebel against the dynasty of Omri, which he does mention Omri. He doesn't mention Ahab or Jezebel, right, but he does mention Ahab's father, Omri.
Right. Omri was the great king who built this kingdom.
Yeah.
So much of the architecture in the northern kingdom of Israel is Omrite. We archaeologists looked at that and like, wow, look what Omri did. So Omri, even though he's only mentioned very shortly in the Bible, a whole lot of archaeology deals with him. And apparently he was a pretty big, popular guy. So it makes sense that Mesha would talk about the house of Omri, mm-hmm, or the descendants of Omri, and Ahab is just kind of left on the side.
It's kind of funny what the world thinks are real hot shots and big important people. That's not the same. God doesn't have the same opinion a lot, mm-hmm, of times. Well, let's see. Another example of the bragging, exaggerating, if you can imagine a politician exaggerating, would be in line 7. And that's where he talks about how he took on Israel, and he spells Israel the way you expect to spell it in Moabite. And so he basically challenges Israel and their house, and he says, Israel is destroyed forever. You can imagine a cackling witch or something. And anyway, destroyed forever. Well, a little premature.
Right.
They're still in Israel today.
You read this in so many of these victory stelas that, we wiped them out. They are no more. We did it again the next year.
Yeah. And part of that same line 7 mentions Omri there. So he thought Omri was a big deal. Let's see.
So this is lining up very much with the biblical text. We see a verisimilitude here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Another reference be worth noting is in line 18. He talks about how he when he would conquer a place, he would destroy it and he'd kill the people, and he's so proud of himself for doing that. And he would take the vessels, in this one instance, the vessels of Yahweh. And it's spelled the same way that you would in Hebrew. Yud, He, Vav, He. And he dragged them, and he dragged them before Chemosh. Kind of reminds me of when the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant and they dragged it before their idol, and that didn't work out too well for them.
The priests of Dagon were not happy that day.
No, they sure weren't.
So specifically, there's something, and you know, with the last few minutes of this, I want to talk about something that you have found in here. That, you know, we look at an Old Testament a prophecy given by Jacob.
Yeah.
And you brought this to my attention, so I don't want to steal your thunder. Can you tell us what's going on here, and what something that Jacob says has to do with the Moabite stone?
Well, we're really talking about Mesha's thunder. He was so proud of himself for having some battles that were just north of the Arnon River, and how his army conquered, or at least defeated in the battles. Certainly didn't wipe them out as a nation. That's laughable. But he had a victory, and the victory was in Adarot, which is located a little bit north of the Walla, which is a tributary of the Arnon. So if you have, let me turn this toward the camera. Okay, so you have the Dead Sea here, and you have the Arnon River, which separates Moab to the south from the territory of Reuben to the north. So the Arnon River flows westward and dumps into the Dead Sea. Okay, here is another stream called the Walla, which flows toward and eventually merges with the Arnon. So basically it dumps into it, so they call that a tributary. And a little bit north of that tributary is the area called Adarot, which kind of translates as crown, so it must have been like a somewhat elevated place with a flat circular. It reminded somebody of a crown.
Sure.
Anyway, so in this area right here, the Moabites defeat the Israelites who are fighting and trying to defend this place, Adarot, which is in the territory of Reuben. And there's a lot of Bible verses that give you the information you need to know in order to identify the boundaries of the different tribes. And that becomes important here because we have the deathbed blessings, which really are prophetic, that Jacob gives that you just mentioned. And let me just read from the Bible's the relevant verses. So we're looking at Genesis chapter 49. Jacob is on his deathbed. He's talking to his different sons. He's telling them what their future is going to be. But what he's really saying at the same time is this is not only the future of you as a man, but this is going to be characteristic of your descendants as a tribe who will come from you, biogenetically speaking. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Reuben, he starts out with son number 1. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellence of dignity and the excellence of power. Wow, this sounds pretty promising. Those are a lot of nice words.
Sure.
Oops. But then the next verse, unstable as water. In other words, weak. Can't depend on it. You shall not excel because, and he tells why. And then, skipping down to verse 9, Gad, different son, different tribe that will come from him. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Gad, troop, overcome, and overcome are all related words in the Hebrew. So this is a word play here. But the point is, Gad is going to be a warrior tribe. They're going to lose some battles, but they'll win in the end. Reuben is going to be weak. How does that relate to the Moabite stone?
So Mesha is fighting the tribe of Reuben. He's in their tribal allotment.
Exactly. He's in their territory. And yet, in the Moabite stone, he never mentions Reuben. He only mentions Gad when he's talking about Adarot. So when he gets to where he's talking about Atarot, he says, and the man of Gad dwelt in the land of Atarot from time indefinite. Meaning the Gadites, they lived in the land of Atarot from forever as far as he's concerned. And then he goes on to say, we beat him. And the point is, he doesn't mention Reuben because why would you be proud? Why would you brag about beating the Reubenites? That's like, I can beat up a kindergartner. So what? But now we defeated the Gadites who came down to help the Reubenites. And we defeated them. Now that's something worth bragging about. Mesha is not saying this to corroborate that Jacob's prophecy is fulfilled. He probably doesn't even know about Jacob's prophecy.
Right.
But without intending to do so, he is corroborating the scriptures. He is saying the Reubenites are not worth talking about, and the Gadites, they are worth talking about, especially if you beat them in a battle.
Sure.
That
They've got a
matches
reputation.
Genesis 49.
Wow. So that's just a very interesting look. That's something that I've never seen discussed before. So, Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for bringing that up. If our viewers want to know more about you and more about your work with the Moabite Stone, how can they find out more?
Well, if they want to know about what I do at ICR, icr.org/James_Johnson would give you stuff on that. But I do lawyer work there, and like I say, I often write for Acts and Facts. I speak at churches, and also I'm responsible for the online school that ICR has. But if you're interested in this study in particular on the Moabite Stone, that's available on Amazon.
Oh, that's great. Does theirs come with a bunch of Post-it notes with all the important stuff?
No, they ship it without the Post-it notes. You have to add those yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for being on the program today. That is cool stuff.
Well, Mr. Van Huss, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks. And thanks for being a part of our program today.